Every black American is bilingual. All of us. We speak street vernacular and we speak job interview. Dave Chappelle.
Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Mentality. It's your boy Gambo, and as always, I'm here with Simmons. Today we're discussing code switching. What is it, and why do we do it? Does it have any effect on us in society and in the workplace? And if so, how do we tackle that? Stay tuned as we chop it up in another interesting episode. All right, welcome back to the show, guys. Drew, how you feeling today, bro?
Fantastic as always, my friend. How you doing?
I am doing phenomenally well as well. And phenomenally well. God damn it, this ties directly into the fucking topic. So today we talking about code switching, man. Code switching. What is it exactly and why do we do it?
So you just put me on to the term literally like today. I didn't know that what this is had its own word, but it's basically your work voice versus your home voice.
Touche.
Now that it has a term to it, I don't know, it just feels more real. And I'm glad that I'm not the only one who does this shit.
Right. So code switching is basically a linguistic phenomenon that basically typically happens around or among multilingual speakers, people who speak different languages or who speak more than one language. And like you said, it's basically like your work voice versus your at-home voice. And so it's especially interesting for black people because, I mean, there are black people all around the world. Not all of us are bilingual. Some of us are. But even those who are not necessarily quote-unquote bilingual, we do have a dialect or Ebonics dialect that can be considered to be its own language. And we speak vernacular. So that in and of itself is technically a language. And so it's interesting to see that we tend to speak differently when we're around different groups of people. Why do you think we do that?
Because we want the job. Obviously.
I mean, but so does it always happen when you had a job interview though? Because I don't think so.
Nah. It depends on who you're around. If I'm in like a new group of people, and it's like, if I'm in like a new group of people for my job, I'm in the military, and they're all military and stuff. We're gonna have our military dialect. We're gonna be saying things that we don't say on the civilian side. If I'm around a bunch of civilians, I hopefully won't be saying this military jargon, but it slips out from time to time. So I'll ask somebody if they're tracking this or some other goofy shit that we do.
Wait, give me some example of military jargon. What would you and your homeboys in the military talk about?
Like it's not like it's not me and my homeboys. It's me and everyone that I work with, and like we do it. At first, we do it because we have to. That's just basic training. You learn how to talk. Then we do it ironically, and then we do it. We can't help doing it anymore. So we'll say Roger instead of okay. We'll say, hey, instead of saying, hey, are you aware that this is happening? You say, hey, are you tracking this? And I say that shit so much.
I
and it's so like, like, oh God.
Because you say civilians a lot. And I thought that was
interesting. Yeah, like
too.
no civilian says civilian. Like
no
we
one
just say
says
people.
That.
Yeah, exactly.
That's interesting.
I drank the Kool-Aid, bro. I drank the Kool-Aid. I'm in now.
So basically, are you saying code switching is basically not just based on actual language, right? It could be based on peer group and surroundings and environment
It's based on the culture that you're in.
Right. Culture.
The military is its own culture. Black, white, Asian, Hispanic, we all say the same things the same way.
So do white people code switch?
Oh yeah. Oh, totally. Totally. I see it all the time. All the time.
How so?
Cause even though I still code switch for like a more professional tone of voice when I'm at work, even my worst or best vernacular speak is still quote unquote pretty white, I've been told. So when people get around people who talk pretty black, quote unquote, they tend to slang it up a bit more. They tend to, what's up, bro? What's up, homie? What's up, dog? Like, I don't know if they're doing it ironically or not. Yeah, I don't know if they're doing it ironically or not, but it's funny as hell every time.
Interesting.
But I don't know, because I kind of do the same thing. Like if I'm hanging around a bunch of black people, I might say bro more than I say dude, and vice versa. When I'm with white people, I'll say dude more than I say bro. Yeah. I definitely say both wherever I go, but
I think you make an interesting point. I think you're right. It's just I think it's a little. You also said this. I think it's just a little different too when you look at the way black people do it versus the way white people might do it, or the way other people might typically do it. Because we typically will code switch for things that are like kind of important, like going for a job, or I don't know, just trying to be seen as not like criminal. Like so.
Yeah.
I think there's definitely like more. There's definitely more impact that necessitates black people to code switch. Would you agree with that?
Yes, and I have the perfect example of, and I think this is code switching. So before I joined the military, I used to be an Uber driver,
Mm.
and I'd play the radio, you know, and
Mm.
depending on who got in my car might depend on what I was playing on the radio.
But I don't know if that's necessarily code switching. Is more so stereotyping. You were stereotyping the fuck out of people. Is what you was doing.
Oh, so I'm just racist, is what you're telling me.
I
All
ain't
right,
saying you
I
was
just want to
racist.
make
I
sure.
said you were stereotyping. It's two
I'm
different things.
stereotyping. Cause no,
Stereotypes
because
lead to
I don't.
racism.
I
I
don't
don't
think
think
so
it's necessarily
because
racist.
I only play things that I like, but I like a broad array of things. So like,
Fair, but you fine tune what you liked to what you thought the person might also like.
I didn't
So
fine tune what I liked. I played what I thought that they would also enjoy.
right,
I didn't change what I liked.
right.
I just played what I thought they might like, and I was wrong every time. By the way, every single time they were like, "What the fuck is the hell you listening to, bro?"
Right. So I
But
mean, I guess it is a sense of code switch, but I would definitely compartmentalize that more as being stereotypical. You know what I mean? And maybe there's a compartment that goes along with code switching and stereotyping. Right? Because if you're around certain people and you feel like you might be more accepted speaking in a certain light, then yeah, you probably are stereotyping. But I will also say that I mean it is stereotyping, but there's also history backing that. So for example, if you had a job interview and you know that they typically won't hire you because you talk like this, versus if you talk like this, then you probably will be talking like this because you're probably more likely to get hired versus if you talking like your normal self. So I think it depends, and I would definitely say for myself, code switching, I never really noticed it before until I got to like high school and shit, and when I started to make a change in my life, and I think more so now it's so prominent. I notice it every time now. It's fucking crazy. Like it's so bad to the point where I code switch not necessarily because of who I'm around. I code switch based on the topic that I'm talking about. You ever catch yourself doing that shit?
the topic you're
The
talking about,
topic I'm talking
elaborate
about,
on
bro.
this.
So if I'm talking about, I don't know, like my experiences as a child or my experiences in the hood or whatever it might be, right? I have a tendency of sounding more quote unquote black or, quote unquote like the way I was raised speaking. When I start to talk about shit like finances or I start to talk about shit like that's supposed to be, I don't know, people would deem to be of a higher subject matter or whatever you want to call it. I start to sometimes find myself like sounding more like this, and I can't help it sometimes because I work at a corporate fucking job. So it's just normal for me to kind of sound like this every now and then. You probably catch me doing it, and I don't even notice it. It's so common that I don't even pit like. I would just do it naturally. I do it on this podcast all the time. Like sometimes I just do it naturally. Like I'm not even thinking about it because it's so ingrained in my membrane that like that's just the fucking way to do it. It's I can't even. I don't even have control over this shit.
Damn, that's a very interesting way of like noticing how you do it. But that's
Yeah.
totally right, because if you're talking about like anything math, science, anything STEM related,
Facts.
anything factually related, you want to sound like an authority on the subject. So
Mm-hmm.
you'll enunciate more. You'll talk with a better cadence. You won't be as, not so much
Absolutely.
as relaxed, but you'll be more, hey, I know what I'm talking about because this, and this. And that's a big thing I've noticed with people from the South. A
Mm,
lot of people with thick Southern accents, they are perceived to be not as intelligent as
absolutely.
people who don't have Southern accents. You could be talking to a PhD with like 3 master's degrees in like all these great fields, but just because they have that thick Southern drawl, they automatically get looked at as, this person might not be as bright. And I've noticed that
Right.
at work
Right.
constantly. People with Southern accents oftentimes just know what the hell they're doing, what they're talking about.
but the
and people get
perception.
judged based on how they sound.
Right. And that goes with like I always go back to like even for a lot of black people at work. That's why you see a lot of that happening because people feel like they will be taken more seriously when they sound in a certain light. You know, when they talk a certain way, you're more likely to listen to them. You're more likely to not feel threatened by their actions or their words rather. And I think it's important for people who are listening from different cultures to understand that like I mean, I'm gonna just keep it a bean. I think oftentimes we assimilate to like Western culture, which is like primarily like white culture. I think we just subscribe to that because that is for some reason held as the standard, or the standard for like being normal is held as a standard for like opulence. It's held as a
Like
standard.
white is the baseline.
Yes, exactly. And
Yeah.
and it's like exactly it's the baseline, and so like if you deviate from that, you are now seen as a caricature. You're seen as like different. So you could have the most important, like for example, like this is a tangent, but I'm just gonna say this because I admire this person. But Ryan Coogler, you know, the director who did Black Panther and Fruitvale Station.
Yes, sir.
So I respect the shit out of people like that because you listen to like him speaking in interviews and stuff like that, and he don't switch. He sound like him, and that's beautiful to me because I think it's difficult to do. Like Kevin Hart is also someone who, I mean, he code switches sometimes, but I think for the most part he sounds like him. I think there's certain people who are able to do that, and it's impressive to me because I feel like you could just kind of keep who you are, and so that's why like, do you think code switching is bad? I'm gonna like divert to that.
Say that one more time.
Do you think code switching is bad?
No, it's not
Why?
bad, but
I'm gonna say this before you answer that. People sometimes attribute code switching to a loss of identity for people because they feel like they now need to assimilate into a certain culture to be accepted and integrated within that culture. So with that being said, do you think code switching is bad? Just curious.
no,
Okay.
because in some scenarios, you have to sound like you know what the hell you're talking about. And as unfortunate as it may be, like for instance, if we're in the middle of war or something and we have to go out and fight these people in this location, I need you to speak coherently and clearly enough. Maybe that might sound like quote unquote talking white or talking out of your normal vernacular, but this message needs to be received across many different sets of ears and be received the same exact way.
So
So in some scenarios,
if I'm getting this correctly,
it's
you're saying that it's not necessarily because that the base white line is white. You're ignoring that, and you're saying the fact that there is a baseline, it's helpful.
yes, in certain scenarios, it's necessary.
Right. It's almost like English, right? Like, I mean, we don't have a universal language yet, you know, until someone invents that shit, which should probably be,
It would probably be Chinese or Spanish or some combination.
right. I mean, but right now it is pretty much English. If you go anywhere in the world, you kind of expect people
Everybody
to speak
speaks English.
right? Some form of it. So it is helpful in that sense, right? When people from different cultures don't speak a language, but they could come to a consensus of like, okay, we'll try to speak this language that we both don't really speak well, but we understand a little bit of it. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, just something that can be as easily received from as many people as possible in that scenario.
That's a good point. I guess I didn't look at it that way, to be honest with you. I guess I was looking at it more so from the perspective of like, why is the baseline white? That's kind of what I looked at it to be like. I mean, you make a good point. Regardless of whether it is white or not, if it's black or Spanish or whatever it is.
Well, that's
has a
another
benefit.
thing is we say, and this is ignorant of us. We say the baseline is white, quote unquote, but white people in America alone, they have like 30 accents that they all use. Like a white person from Massachusetts sounds very different from a white person from South Dakota. Sounds very different from a white person from California. Black people, for the most part,
Sound very different.
East Coast, West Coast, we have a lot of similarities.
But we have a lot of differences. I think
Everybody
we have
has a lot of differences, and everybody has a lot of similarities.
Absolutely.
So we're all one in this big rainbow we call America.
I understand, but it's like, yeah, there are differences between like, you know, white dialects, but I think often it doesn't matter what kind of white dialect you typically use, unless like maybe it's a thick Southern accent or something like that. And yeah, I can agree that typically is like frowned upon or not necessarily just looked down on. But I think even if you're from Boston, even if you're from New York, and you got a thick Brooklyn accent, or if you're from I don't know Maryland and you got that DC area accent, like
No,
people,
exactly what you're talking about.
people still going to like hold you to a higher. They're gonna perceive you to be at a higher level just because of the way you sound, because you sound white. But if you sound black remotely, you pronounce you like I'm from New York. We're both from New York, so we tend to round our R's a little bit, right? And so I don't know. I feel like once you start to talk like that and you don't exactly enunciate your words as much as you probably should, people will probably look down on that a little bit.
Okay, so you know what? I'm gonna backtrack a little bit. While I agree, yeah, sure, you should. If you're not gonna enunciate, then people might look at you differently. I don't think necessarily you're you're talking white,
I don't. Yeah, I'm not agreeing with it. Well, I don't think you're
because I
talking.
don't.
I don't
Because
think you could
to
talk
say
a
that you
color.
talk white,
I don't think you could talk a color.
yeah, you
To
can't
clarify.
talk like a race.
Right. I agree
Because
with
to
that.
insinuate that, yeah, to insinuate having proper English as you talk is talking white. Having improper English means you're talking black or another race that's not white. And I've always heard you talk white, and I
Yeah, I
always
hate that
ask,
shit.
what is, well, how do I talk black then? Like, like that's always been like a real frustrating thing to me. How do I talk black? Let me know. Show me an example right here, right now, sir.
Well, like I think
Please.
it's what you said earlier. It's more so a culture. It's not more so a race. It's more so like we know if you from the projects in New York, you probably sound more likely a different way versus if you from the streets of Crenshaw, in California. So yeah, there are like those things. You can't attribute them to race, but the reason why people typically do is because the demographic of people who fill those areas are typically a certain race or a certain minority group, and that's why people have that they draw that parallel and make that distinction between those two things. But I think you're right. It doesn't necessarily mean. See, I fucking code switching right now. I just fucking did it. Anyhow, I just fucking I fucking noticed that I did that shit too. But whatever. Um, because like you have because you have those demographics within those areas. I think that's why people are drawing those parallels. But you're right. It's not necessarily attributable to the race. It's more so the commonality that people find in those areas, and they say, "Well, you're not talking black or you're talking white." But you're right. You can't talk a race. You can't, and it's just more so the culture in the area and the environment that you're raised in. So I could give a perfect example. If you were to birth a kid and put him in China, that motherfucker gonna speak Chinese. I don't care where he from in the world. He could be a black kid. He gonna speak Mandarin. He gonna speak Chinese like a fucking champ. Excuse my language. He gonna speak it. He gonna speak Chinese like a champ. And there's no doubt about that. Just like if you were to take a Chinese kid and bring him to the States and have him grow and confine him in a certain demographic or a certain area, they're gonna sound American as hell. Like if they're in New Jersey, they're gonna sound like a Jerseyite, or however you call a New Jersey person. They're gonna sound like that person from New Jersey. So it's more so the culture and the environment that you're shaped in. Like for example, I could take me, like my accent. I'm a product. I'm a byproduct of like being around like 50 million different people. So you hear like, you hear black, you hear New York, you hear African, you hear Caribbean, you hear Spanish. You could hear a bunch of different dialects within my accent and you hear white. You could hear a bunch of different dialects within the way I speak and different words that I say just because I've been around and I've been exposed around so many different people growing up. I've moved around a lot. And when you have that, it kind of shapes your tongue a little bit. You can't help it, you know?
Yeah, people always know when I meet them that I'm from the Northeast. They just can't pinpoint where because it kind
Right.
of fluctuates. And even when I lived in Texas for like a year and change, I started talking like a
Like
Texan.
Texas,
It's
yeah,
just
exactly.
like and it's something you can't even help sometimes. It's just I never went as the farthest south I've ever gone before I moved to Texas was
Maryland?
Maryland. Yeah, like I barely even went to Virginia before I and now I'm like in Texas and I go to Oklahoma and stuff
Word.
like that. And now I'm going up and down the East Coast and stuff. And just if you go somewhere long enough, like even as an adult, you'll kind of start unintentionally, unbeknownst to you, sounding like people who live there.
Now this actually raises a question for me. A question for you. Now that you're living in Germany, right, and the language is not English, do you think when people speak English to you, do you think you're like picking up?
Oh yeah.
You think you're,
Oh yeah. When Germans speak English,
Oh,
it's a
man.
very specific way,
Right.
and as I meet more and more German people, like I don't even say hello anymore. I say hello. Cause that's how they say
Yeah,
hello.
dog.
They say, hello, and like I've done it before, just like oh hello,
like who
and
the?
it just if the hell is that?
Oh my god, that's funny. But so, do you think your German friends are picking up from your dialect?
Yes, and it's funny as hell when they do. It's hilarious. It's the funniest thing in the
Do they do it
world.
on purpose or just subconsciously?
Uh, they do it on purpose. Like when I hear them
Mm.
do American accents, it's the greatest thing I've ever witnessed with my eyes. It's the goofy because they do it so well.
Really?
Because they all think that we sound like we're from California,
Of
like we're
course they
surfers
do.
from
Yeah,
California.
like
It's the
yeah.
goofiest shit. It's the goofiest shit in the world. But it's funny every time they do it, and they do a really good job when they do it too.
Yeah, I've noticed that other countries tend to do better doing American accents than Americans do at doing other accents.
Oh yeah, like I know some British people, they do the best American
Yeah, some of
accents.
the actors, the British actors, they have some of the best American accents.
You can't even tell. Like
You
Tom
yeah,
Holland,
yeah.
or
Oh my
either
god,
he's
yeah.
British or Australian. He's one of them.
I
But
think he's
yeah,
British, but yeah, you can't tell. You cannot. You can't tell.
Idris Elba.
It's,
We can go down the list for a
he
minute, yo.
did
For real, for
a
real.
black, like an African American accent. He did a black person, like that's kind of impressive. I mean, I know he black, but them like being black in Britain, I
He
feel like
did a black Baltimore
word,
'90s accent,
like it's so specific.
like you. And then when you hear him talk,
You're like, who
like
is
his actual
this?
voice, it's like you British.
That's the first thing I said to when I found out. I was like, this dude British? I didn't know that. But yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think it has to do with media and the fact that, a lot of American television is so prominent in other spaces, whereas it's not as prominent. Their culture is not as prominent here in terms of media. So that's probably one of the biggest things I think. But I mean, so okay, you don't think code switching is bad. What okay, you mentioned that, you think code switching could be a good thing. Um and you think that we code switch basically to why do we code switch to
To make people,
like us?
I don't know if it's to make people around us feel comfortable or to make us feel comfortable around people. It could be a mixture of both. Because everyone has this thing inside of them. They want to feel like part of the group.
Absolutely.
If you have any investment in that group, if you don't fuck with them, then like, okay, these losers over here, I'll be over here, mind my business. But if you like that's your peoples and you're with them every day, unintentionally you just do because we have this need to want to be a part of something bigger than ourselves.
But so do you think that code switching does like alienate or kind of like diminishes the sense of identity for people though?
No,
You don't think so? I think a
not
little
at
bit
all.
it does. And here's why.
I can't imagine that. But go on, please let me know.
Yeah. So, for example, if I can speak to my experiences as a black guy, so because I'm black and because I'm used to speaking in a certain way, I don't think it makes me more knowledgeable or less knowledgeable if I speak in the way that I normally speak. And I will speak personally. I think to answer your question, I think I would code switch if I'm honest with myself. I code switch for both reasons. Oftentimes, I want people to take me seriously because I understand the perception that goes with the way that I typically will sound normally. And also, I want to feel like I belong sometimes. So if I'm at work, I just want you to mainly take me seriously. So I don't want you to think, I'm some ignorant dude because that's probably what you think when I sound normally, you know? And so that's one of the reasons why I code switch. And at the same token, I want you to accept me to be someone who is professional, to see me as professional. But it's ridiculous to me that that's what it takes for people to see you as professionals. So sometimes, honestly, like when I consciously think about it, I try my best not to like code switch when I'm at work, because I think it's so ignorant. I think it's so ignorant that I have to switch my whole not pronoun like not like I have to switch my whole tongue game for you. Like pause, switch my whole tongue game. You know what I mean?
Shit
Just,
spicy, bro.
switch my whole, dialect for you just to take me seriously. I don't think that should be like, so what I sound like that. You know what I mean? I'm still hitting everything that needs to be hit. I'm still talking about things that are still important. I'm still communicating with you. It's just your ignorance that I think is kind of holding you back to see that, like, to hear me out. It's really what's holding me back. And we can get into it because when we tend to code switch, and you and I were talking about this earlier, people are like, oh, he's so well spoken. Well, am I not well spoken when I don't code switch? Like, that's bullshit. You know what I mean?
So honestly, maybe it's because of the places we work. You know, I work in the military. You work for corporate finance, so our demographics we work with are vastly different.
Right.
But I feel literally the exact opposite. I prefer to code switch when I'm at work because my actual natural state of speaking, I save that for myself and people closest to me. I like to have that disconnect when I'm at work of, hey, I'm at work, and that kind of helps me stay in that work mentality. I don't want to get too comfortable when I'm at
Okay.
work. You know what I'm saying?
Fair.
I want to be able to go in and be like, good morning, everybody. On today's agenda, we're going to be accomplishing this, this, and this, and this. And then
Gotcha.
when I get off, I get in my car and I just start cussing, start slurring words, and just like I get to it's like
Well, see, that's the thing. I
I say
understand.
it's like taking your bra off after a long day at work. It's just let them shits hang, man.
I get it. I mean, I guess I get it. And I guess it boils down to preference. So, also, like, in a lot of spaces that I've been in corporate, it seems like people are pushing more for bringing your quote unquote authentic self to work. But I think even
And
that
that's
comes
what
with a
I'm
limitation.
scared of.
That comes with
And
a
that's what I'm
limitation.
scared of because I don't want to be thought of as like, and I don't I this is the only term that comes to mind. I don't want to be a dancing monkey.
You don't be
So
caricature. Exactly.
if you yeah, exactly, if you know this is how I normally talk, I don't want you to,
Right.
you know
So you're code switching.
don't.
That's my point, though. You're code switching to make other people feel comfortable because of their ignorance, and that's not right. That's my point because you're not being a caricature if you're being yourself. If you're speaking like the way you normally talk. Like, I never think of you as a caricature because we're talking, a certain way. I mean, you and I are boys, so we might curse and stuff like that. I'm not saying curse because, take your authentic self to work and curse and be a damn fool. But I think the way you enunciate your words and the way you talk, you can still be professional while being your authentic self. Is my point. But when you're code switching, or like even being black and code switching might not be as strict as someone who is, I don't know, like from Latin America, right? From, let's just say they're from Peru, and they have to like give up not only the way that they act, but also give up the way that they speak. And I don't know. I think it's a difficult thing to have to switch up the entire narrative of who you are, just to appeal to someone's rhetoric or perception of what they think is professional. I think you could still be professional in a baseline way of things, and not necessarily having to switch up the way that you sound. But I just don't think that we're there yet. And as much as we keep pushing to bring your authentic self to work, I just don't think we're necessarily there yet. And I do think you're right. There is definitely there's limitations to that. You need to do that within reason. But it would be nice to be able to just go to work and be myself, speak like myself, still be professional and not be taken for a damn fool, not be considered a caricature because I said, I don't know what y'all doing today versus what are you doing today. Because I think white people do it all the time. Like they do it all the time. Like they use, and another thing I noticed is, like, if we're talking about code switching, like if you look at slang, I have very much so noticed that when we use vernacular or slang in a professional setting, it is seen as grotesque, disgusting. You're seen as a caricature.
That's pretty harsh
I
words,
don't
man. I
think
don't know
so,
about all
and
that.
I'll
In
get into it.
2020,
I think so. I mean, my personal experience, just because I try so hard not to be seen as like a caricature. I just feel like whenever white people use slang, it's considered in a professional setting. I think it's considered to be more palatable. So like I've noticed that like a lot of white people are working like, oh, I skirted that. Yeah, I skirted that. if I said something like that, I feel like they'll look at me to be like, yo, you laugh, but it's like common, right? If I said something like that, it will be perceived completely different. And it's not malicious. It's not like, people will, I think it's just subconscious. It's like if we use the same slang term in a professional setting, it's looked at differently. But to be fair, I think if we got out of that environment, we go to like a more leisure like environment. Say for example, we're going out to the club and I use a slang term, I'll be more desired than when a white person does it. Would you agree with that? So like if we're out and about and we're in a certain friend group and I was using slang and I was like, oh man, it's chopping outside or whatever it is. I think it would be more desirable for me to say it versus when a white person would say it because they would be looked down on. It would be like, this is kind of weird coming from you.
No, I don't think so.
Maybe dependent on how you was raised. If you're from someone
There
from an
you
urban
go.
culture, then yeah, it's different. If it comes off naturally, but if it doesn't, I think it'll be weird. But I'm just saying, there's a distinction when you look at it from the work environment, where it's like typically when I use a slang, even though it is prominent in my culture, it would be looked down upon. Versus if a white person was to use it, I think it would be more palatable. I've just noticed that, and I know for sure that's like very true from my in my experience.
Well, that's kind of been the norm for the past 100 odd years. Ever since we started doing jazz, and then white people started listening to jazz, and same thing with
Right.
rock and roll. White people started doing rock and roll.
Right.
Now with hip hop, white people start using hip hop.
Exactly.
It's a never ending
Exactly.
cycle. Should it be that way? Probably not. Is it that way? Yes, it
Absolutely.
is. As of nowadays, since everyone's a little bit more forgiving, a little bit more equality this, equality that, it all depends on what's more authentic to the person. So if a white person does use slang, if it's seen as genuinely them, I wouldn't even really notice it.
Right.
I don't even notice when someone's not being. I don't. I'll notice when you're not being authentic, whether that's using more or less slang, and if it's a conscious effort to do so. So if you code switch unnaturally, then that's more jarring than if you just were your natural self. But that's just to me. I don't know how
Absolutely.
the rest of the world perceive that, but I don't know. I just kind of fuck with everybody doing their own shit. You know what I'm saying? But I'll never say that at work. I'll never say that exact sentence at work the way that I just said it.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point. I think having that comparison to like music, even I think it's perfect. I think you're absolutely right. I think it's just more palatable and it's easily integrated within society when it's adopted by white folk. I just think that's just the way it is, at least in the U.S. And that just the U.S. kind of is like the leader in media, so it just kind of spreads around the world. But it's just interesting to see that. I think it would be nice if we ever get to the point where people of all different cultures, are able to speak normally and naturally while still being professional, you know. Um, because if you look at something like a country like I don't know, like Brazil, they probably don't speak English at work, right? They probably speak in Portuguese. They speak in their language. But there's still a sense of etiquette that goes with being professional and still, speaking in your language. Or even if you look at, I don't know, let's take like a Caribbean country or an African country, they still speak in a way that's considered to be etiquette and speaking in a way that's normal. I just feel like in the U.S. it's typically that we have a baseline because it's so integrated here. I don't know, and that's just my takeaway from that. It would be nice if we can be ourselves. Everyone could be themselves and just speak naturally. It would be cool, and not have to succumb to adhering to a baseline. That's more unnatural than anything really. That's the way I feel about that.
Um, I know that there's a way the world should be, and there's a way the world is, and more often than not, you go somewhere, someone's going to judge you based on pretty much every single thing that you do and emote as a human
Absolutely.
being, let alone as a black man, but just everything that you do
But
regardless.
so I want to touch on that because it's not necessarily. I don't think the conversation is necessarily around what the world is and what the world should be. I think it's most likely what kind of world would we want to see. We understand what the world is. No one's disagreeing with that. We understand these are the laws of the world that we live in, and this is how to navigate it. I'm talking about what would you like to see in a better world, because that's ultimately what we're trying to strive for, right? If we're being honest, if hopefully that's what I would think people want to strive for, is to have an environment that's better and inclusive of more people, and that's better for everyone as a whole. So steering the conversation in that direction, what would you like to see the world be?
Um. So here's the thing with that question though is more often than not, I don't understand half the shit most people say anyway. Like you said, I'm gonna keep it a bean. I never heard anyone say I'm gonna keep it a bean. I don't know what that means, bro.
Yo, that means I'm gonna keep it
That's
100.
just-
You know what?
That's what I figured.
Right.
Yeah, I'm gonna keep it 100% with you.
Right.
I figured that's what
the
it
thing.
was.
That's the thing, though.
But I never heard it before.
You can understand it even when you don't know it. Like, for example, New York slang is vastly different from Delaware slang. And when I moved there, I was very confused. But you know what's funny? My brain could understand it. I don't know how I could. Context. It's a huge thing.
Okay, with that, what about when people from the South say, "Man, you're nuttier than squirrel turds," and it's like you never heard no shit like that
But you
before.
get it.
So it's like
But you get
that.
it.
That's a bad one because it's easy to get. But like, will you like on SpongeBob and shit, and saying to be like, "Man, I'm tired of tarnation and corn cob and a buck on a tree." Just it's to them. They got the context clues for that, and they understand it. But I have no idea what on God's earth they're talking
now
about.
I think we're also veering off from like a very different topic, because now we're talking about slang, and that's very different from code switching, right? So
Is it?
it is. I think
Because
it
you
is.
say you want to, because if that's how you normally talk, and you would like to be more accepted into the world and the workplace and all that stuff, I'm not gonna. I personally won't judge you. I would hope someone wouldn't judge you based on that. But you also gotta understand sometimes, context clues or not, people just don't know. I've said things at work.
Right.
People just don't know what I'm talking about.
I'm not talking about the words that you use necessarily, because now you're more so talking about words. I'm talking about structure of sentence. I'm talking about inflection of voice. I'm talking about tonality. That's more so what code switching alludes to. So when you're like, yeah, I'm not saying go to work and talk in slang. I'm not saying that. Like, I'm saying, when you're black, you can't even do that because it's going to be looked down upon. That's what I was trying to say earlier. But if you're white, you could get away with that shit. That's basically all I was trying to say.
That's a hard statement. I wouldn't go as far as say
That's a
that.
very, very true reality that I live in. I can whole
That
a
is
thousand,
a reality
a
that
million
you
percent
live
say
in.
that. That's what I'm saying.
That you
and
live in.
I see it more and more in corporate environments. I'm just saying that I'm speaking from my perspective on it. I can't speak for anyone else's perspective. I can speak on my reality. You in the military, so I feel like your culture is gonna be very different from like a corporate culture. It's just absolutely, it's not gonna be the same. Because I feel like in the military, people might see themselves as more, I don't know, and correct me if I'm wrong, y'all are more of a community. I feel like if you're in corporate, there's like levels to this shit, so it's different. It's
Trust me, the military is extremely corporate. Like the majority of what we do is all politics and
Right.
and running as a corporation.
a lot of red tape.
And there are certain like I'll never speak to an officer the way that I speak to an enlisted person.
Right.
And that I work with nothing but officers and senior enlisted people. And that's a matter of code switching for me to that's ingrained in you. It's like there's two different groups of people. So while yes, we're more accepting of if we're one on one, like if there's like a detail or something like that, and we got to go fill a bunch of ammo cans or fill some generators with gas and stuff like that. We just shooting the shit, we talking, minding our business. Military, we curse a lot. But if I'm at the hospital, there's no cursing in nursing.
Right.
I won't curse. I'll have to code switch around my patients. I can't have my military jargon around my patients.
Okay. I understand what you're saying, and like that's a good point that like you do code switch in that regard. But I think it's interesting that when you go to work and you're around everyone else who I feel like their code switch is accepted, but yours isn't. It's frustrating if you catch my drift. If like you can come to work and everyone else could like use, like for example, like another example that I'll give is like, increasingly in all corporate environments that I've been, if you're a white dude, and I'm sorry, I keep coming from white dudes, but I'm just saying, speaking out of experience, you can curse and get away with it. You can say all the F's, B's, A's, and it's like considered to be like normal for you. You're considered to be like a guy. Whereas like if you're a black dude and you say something like that, you are an animal. Like I'm not saying anyone literally thinking that, but you just feel the energy. Like you could feel that. Like you cannot get away with that. When you need to be on your best behavior as a black person in a corporate job because you're lucky to even be here. That's really in reality. That's really and I'm speaking for myself and I'm speaking based on conversations that I've had with people. And I would love to know what the comment section thinks. I would love to know what people think and you know their experiences. If I'm completely wrong, please, I'm open to, you know, understanding that the world's a lot bigger than my experiences. But I'm just speaking based on the conversations that I've had and experiences that I've dealt with. And that's just very prominent. It's like you are basically on eggshells when you're at work as a black dude talking versus I feel like when you're a white dude, I mean, don't get me wrong, there's also like sectors where you're also on eggshells when you're a white dude, but I feel like in terms of language, dog, you're good. You have so much more leeway. And that's my point. Like code switching is not necessarily the slang that you're using. It's more so the way in which you enunciate your words. It's more so in which the way you have to structure your sentences. And I think, like, I gave an example. I could, like, if I said, "How y'all doing?" versus how are you all doing?" I'm more likely to be perceived, you know, like as professional if I said, "How are you all doing?" Versus I feel like a white person could come in and say, "How y'all doing?" Like, you know, they probably don't talk like that, but hey y'all, and that's okay. But like, you know, if I said, "How y'all doing?" and "Hey y'all," like those are similarities, right? Those are similar statements in different cultures, but I feel like one's always gonna be more accepted than the other, and that's my point about code switching.
So what is your overall summation on or opinion of code switching? Because I think we're looking at it from two very different aspects. I'm trying to get us back to that middle ground. Because from what I'm picking up from you is you wish that it would be equal for everybody to speak the way they're comfortable with it. Please correct me if I'm wrong or if I'm veering off into a weird direction.
Professionally, yes. So
Professionally.
speak the way and use the dialect. Like the way you pronounce your words don't have to necessarily be in a certain light. So it would be nice if everyone can speak like they normally would speak without, you know, using vernacular, without using, you know, curse words. It would be nice if you all have that equal level playing field in that regard. And my understanding from what you're saying is that you don't think because I think you're looking at it from a perspective of like vernacular. People might not understand the words that you might use, right? So therefore, like code switching and using the white baseline is a positive. That's kind of what you're saying.
You know, I don't think it's a white baseline. It's just enunciating so everyone can understand.
There's nothing wrong
I
with
don't see it,
enunciation.
and I'll never call it a white baseline.
We did
either.
earlier though. You did.
And I corrected myself. It's not a white baseline. It's just a way that is easily digested by the majority of people around you. Because when you call it a white baseline, you're insinuating that there is a level of superiority or inferiority on anything that is not falling in line with that white baseline.
I would agree with that. And I don't think it's necessarily a white baseline too, but I do think there is leeway that I think that
White people get away with saying some
with
weird
white
shit at work,
privilege
and we
gets you.
can't.
Yes, there's a certain leeway that you get with white privilege. Is my point, and I think it goes. It's in this specific topic. It ties into topics of like language and word choice. That's kind of what I'm trying to say.
Okay. I totally get, understand, acknowledge. That's how you feel. In this particular job that I'm in right now, I have yet to experience that from a racial perspective. It's more of a rank based perspective. The
Exactly my
higher
point.
your rank is, you can get away with saying way more off the wall shit to an extent. Because if you say some goofy shit super high up in rank, that's everything. You're done. As opposed to a private saying it, it's like you done private. So for us, I would say it's more rank based. I'm sure I know the military is has the most imperfect track record of racism, racial issues all throughout history. I'm not saying it's all sunshine and rainbows in this place, but they're making the moves to kind of negate all that. And I've noticed it because I've noticed people who have that more comfortable vernacular at work and they are white and they're perceived a certain way because of just how they talk.
Right. And I think you said something that's important, pointing to the fact that in the military, things might be classified more based on rank, right? So like if someone's at a higher rank, they can speak in a certain light. In corporate, it's not necessarily even that, and I think race plays a large part in that. Like, yeah, maybe you can get away with, like, I don't know, if you're like, no, like I think even if you're of color, if you're in a certain minority group, the higher you go, the higher the stakes are for you. So like you have to be extra careful. Like it just it gets worse in that regard if you're a minority in corporate America. Like it's just worse in that regard.
Fuck.
It's,
Yeah, dude, you're right.
you can't say that shit. You can't say certain shit because you say certain shit. Now you cascade it down to everyone else who's below you and of color. Like now you just ruined it you just spoiled a whole bean soup for everybody else. You ruined it. That's just my experience in corporate. And again, I'll be happy if other people are working at other great companies that like they haven't experienced that or have a difference of opinion. Please let me know. Maybe I'm just completely ignorant about it, but my experience has shown that. And granted, I work for and I'm not tooting my horn, it's one of the best companies to work for. It's very forward, thinking. It's very liberal in that regard, and it's very inclusive. But I don't think it's a company thing. I think it's more so of a national historical cultural thing in the U.S. I think that's just what it is, because you don't really see a lot of these issues in a lot of different places. It's just that we're so, like it's a melting pot. We have so many different people and different cultures that you're gonna have these issues arise. And I make the distinction when I say if you look at someone like from Peru, or if you look at someone in Brazil, or even if you look at someone in an African country, like I don't know, let's say Nigeria or something, it's gonna be different because everybody there most likely look and sound the same. So it's like there's no disparity of what you sound like, because we all sound the fucking same. So there's professional and unprofessional, and that's about it. But I think here there's more nuance that goes into what professionalism is, and that's what's annoying. That there's like you get perceived a certain way if your definition of professionalism does not match my perception of what professionalism should be based on my culture. It's just a difficult subject. It's a difficult topic. And I think that's one of the reasons why people code switch so much, because they feel like they want to either assimilate or want to be taken seriously. I guess that's my summation on that topic. It's difficult.
Damn, dude. You really I was thinking one way, and you really you brought clarity to it for me, because I just realized that I've been code switching on every single podcast we've done so far. Every single one, beginning to end. And I'm pissed off that I have to do it, but I do get the frustration, because just because I talk a certain way or use certain colorful language doesn't mean I'm any less professional than if I didn't.
Code switching can be good, it can be bad. It's just, for now, like, you're right. I mean, hey, you do what you can do to be taken seriously. You do what you can do to appeal to people's interests, and that's just life in general. Like, but ultimately, it would be nice if you can be who you are and still respect who you are as a professional individual, regardless of your culture, the way you pronunciate your T's, or the way you enunciate your R. Yeah, that would be especially nice.
Yeah.
And like, you're right with the Southern thing. Like, it would be nice if people could kind of remove from their heads, from their minds, that just because this person has a Southern accent, they're not intelligent. They are. You just need to get out of your own way and see that, and stop being ignorant about it. Just because they sound like this, and I can't even do a Southern accent, doesn't mean they're not smart. They're not intelligent. They are.
Can I pet that dog? Can I pet that dog?
Yo, you ever seen the show Ozark?
Oh, bro.
Dog.
What you know about Ozark?
Talking about, the curly headed chick, right?
Yes, sir.
The blonde chick. She's from New York, dog. You know that's a made up accent?
Yeah, that's Julia Roberts' niece.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Yo, she's super
She's a
talented.
phenomenal actress.
Crazy. Crazy.
And she got the thickest accent in the whole show. She the
thought
smartest one in that
I
mode.
honestly thought they plucked her from the woods of the South.
There's some bush baby out here.
I thought she was like born in that type of environment. And then I saw in an interview and she was speaking regular, like, you know, she from New York. And I'm like, oh my God. It's impressive. But yeah, that's how it goes. I feel like even it goes to show that even if you're in the US and you have a certain accent, it could still, I don't know, people still look down on it. It's just interesting. Yeah. But I think we've kind of come to a conclusion, you know.
Yeah, a little something.
Not necessarily, you know, an agreement, but which is fine. That's what dialogue and conversation is about. With that being said, I don't have any other wrapping up words. Drew, do you have anything to add?
Y'all stay safe. Wash your hands. That's all I got for you, bro.
Word. All right. We appreciate y'all for tuning in. Thank you for listening. Y'all can catch us on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you listen to your podcast on. And as always, please make sure to leave a review, comment, subscribe, follow us on Instagram and Facebook. And as always, thank y'all for tuning in again. Drew, I'll catch you later. Deuces.
Deuces, bro.